Hello and welcome, my friends, to the first inaugural installment of what will become a regular feature on the TechDweeb channel, the Dusty Games Society. The Dusty Games Society is a group of like-minded retro gaming enthusiasts who are fed up with the direction that modern games and game design philosophies have taken. We yearn for the simpler days, when games didn't hold your hand like an exhausted single mother trying to control a rambunctious toddler. The good old days of video games are what calls to us. And not only do the retro games from bygone days of yore have a quaint nostalgic charm to them that soulless modern games lack, there are also a freaking ton of them. Oh my gosh, man. There's like 100,000 retro games that'll play on even the most modest retro handheld. You have a lifetime of gaming ahead of you with the mere click of an add to cart button. So, how do you choose? How do you pick the best games to play? Well, you don't have to, because the Dusty Games Society will tell you which ones to play. My goal in forming the Dusty Games Society was to bring together some like-minded tech and retro gaming enthusiasts to cavort together and experience some of the most important classic retro games of yesteryear. I'll tell you more about the DGS and how you can take part at the end of the video, but for now, without further dilly-dallying, as my dear mother would say, let us venture forth into the first game that graced the Dusty Games Society, an all-time classic piece of gaming history. This, my dweebs, is the one and only Gargoyle's Quest. What do you think of my fake English accent? It's pretty good if I do say so myself. The original Game Boy is a special system to me, not just because it holds an important place in my heart, but also because it's an important piece of the history of gaming. It was the first portable gaming system that was popular, really. Lots of established franchises from arcades and home consoles made their way to the Game Boy, albeit in more limited forms, and today's game is the perfect example of one of those games. Those of you who remember Ghosts and Goblins might remember a little red gargoyle who probably killed you with his gargoyle claws, clawing off your armor and then your face. Well, that character is the adorable star of Gargoyle's Quest. But don't let his cute little pixelated sprite fool you. This little guy is a hero, right up there with Mario and Kirby. The story begins thusly. A long time ago, the Ghoul realm barely escaped great peril. A large army of destroyers came from a neighboring universe. The creatures of the Ghoul realm were no match for the powerful destroyers. Just when everyone had given up hope, a great fire swept over the realm, wiping out the destroyers' army. Several hundred years have passed, and the realm is threatened once again. So our hero is a cute little gargoyle named Firebrand, who it appears is destined to be the Red Blaze, the fabled champion of the Ghoul realm, and thus is tasked with saving the Ghoul realm from the evil wrath of King Braeger, who he's gotta defeat to bring peace to the land once again. Not the best gaming story, I'll admit that. And that's the best part of it too, to be honest. And as these things often go, the plot is like just a flimsy pretext to give you a reason to go on a murderous rampage and kill a bunch of monsters and bad guys as you explore the land. But that's just the way games were back then, you know? Even the games with good stories, they'd be like, oh, the life crystal has been shattered by an ancient magic and the pieces were gifted to the 4 oracles. So go and kill everything that moves and remake the crystal so you can summon the final boss and beat the game. Our standards were just lower back then, during the dawn of gaming. So we need to cut Gargoyle's Quest some slack here. It's a fine story for a little action platformer game with light RPG elements. Speaking of which, the game is divided into 2 kinds of gameplay styles. The first is a typical third-person RPG overhead view where Firebrand can traverse the Ghoul realm's towns and world map, and the second is side-scrolling battle levels. The whole thing is sort of reminiscent of Zelda 2 on the NES. Light RPG exploration with some side-scrolling action. While traversing the overhead map, Firebrand will get sucked into random encounters with enemies that must be defeated in order to return to the world map. And there are also ghouls that can be encountered that instigate the battle level, where you can do some combat and use those abilities that you've been earning to defeat the bad guys. Speaking of which, Firebrand possesses a range of abilities. You can walk, obviously. You can jump, and you can jump higher depending on which items that you've obtained. And you can fly. I mean, you're a gargoyle, so obviously flying is going to be in the game, but really it's more like hovering in the air for a period of time, depending on the items that you've collected. And you can stick to walls, which seems kind of insignificant, but you'll quickly realize that it's probably your most important ability because it dictates a lot of the combat and navigation. These mechanics may seem simple at first, but after a while you'll see that the tight controls make them very satisfying to execute. Gliding around for short distances and sticking to walls and breathing little fireballs feels precise, but overall you still feel very vulnerable. It's easy as heck to die in this game. It's like a easy to learn but difficult to master kind of game, and it is unquestionably challenging. This is another thing about playing these old retro games. By today's standards, they can feel kind of unfair because they don't hold your hand at all. While I would never admit to using save states to progress through the game, if you needed to use them to prevent rage quitting, I certainly wouldn't blame you. In Gargoyle's Quest, Firebrand can only attack by firing projectiles. At the start, you'll only have access to a weak projectile with limited range. However, you can collect power-ups for his projectiles throughout the game. Different enemies and objects drain varying amounts of hit points, and your hit points increase as you progress, but you start with only 2. Firebrand can acquire various items to provide different effects, including some that passively increase your abilities. For example, the Fingernail of the Scepter, interesting name, which increases your jumping ability for the rest of the game. Other items can also increase the amount of time that you can hover or fly. Despite the limitations imposed by the Game Boy, the graphics and audio of Gargoyle's Quest do a great job of representing the mood of Firebrand's world. The music has a haunting nocturnal quality reminiscent of a church organ. And fans of Ghosts and Goblins are likely to recognize several familiar themes. Similarly, the visuals are somber and subdued, painting a picture of a bleak and desolate world, the Ghoul Realm. I enjoyed my time with Gargoyle's Quest. I beat it. It's a quick game, just like 3 or so hours, but it's a wonderfully simple game, in a good way, with satisfying depth. And it's a great game to play today because it's a piece of gaming history. The first mobile adaptation of a long-running franchise. It serves as a poignant reminder of the straightforward yet punishing style of games from bygone days. This truly timeless release deserves due recognition and appreciation, even today. And there you have it, Gargoyle's Quest for the Game Boy. Not the most revolutionary game in the world, but a fun game with tight mechanics, well done art and sound, and a piece of gaming history that is worth giving a go. And now let's see what other members of the Dusty Games Society had to say about Gargoyle's Quest, shall we? Here we have Stu, excited about taking the first steps of his adventure, playing on what looks like the RG35XX if I'm not mistaken. AJP found the game super hard, but was able to progress decently far with the use of save states, and then he went on a work trip and forgot about finishing it. 5 Mountain Dews out of 7. I'll take it. And then we have Boris Z. This guy played the game on his arcade machine, apparently. He finished the game, he enjoyed it, but he also found it very hard. He thought the game was like a smaller, simpler Zelda 2, and gave it 7 root beers out of 10. A fine score indeed, Boris Z. The Dusty Games Society is comprised of members of the TechDweeb community who have earned a place at the Dusty table to play Dusty games. With me, how did I pick these privileged few? Simple. They are my patrons, those scrumptious dweebs who pay me money to support the important work that I do, and as a bonus get to be part of the private members-only section of my Discord server. Every month I post the game that we'll play, and then we all play it, and then we talk about it all month long, our trials and tribulations, like a book club for retro games. And if you would like to become one of the proud few who have vowed allegiance to TechDweeb and as a side bonus take part in the Dusty Games Society, there's a link down there in the description below, as always. But regardless of whether you throw money at a stranger on the internet or not, I hope you enjoyed coming along for a tour of the Ghoul Realm. I hope you check out Gargoyle's Quest on your retro handheld of choice and have a great time doing so, and I hope you join us next time on the Dusty Games Society. That's all for today, my friends. As always, I'm your humble host, TechDweeb. Thanks for watching. Stay dusty, my friend.